morning. I see you're practicing social distancing. That's interesting. How are you this morning? Are any of you familiar with caterpillars? What's a caterpillar? It turns into a butterfly. It's an insect. Is that what it is? Okay. And what do you mean by that? Okay, very good. Did you know that? Oh. All right. You know, have you ever seen a line of caterpillars? One of the habits of caterpillars is that they find a leader and they follow it. And sometimes if you see it, a caterpillar there'll be a whole bunch of caterpillars, one following the other. Think that's a good idea? Not if you want to get eaten. All right, so it might not be a good idea to follow a leader all the time. Okay. Now, do you know what would happen if the leader goes in a circle? That's what you get. You know that sometimes caterpillars, the lead caterpillar might keep going around in a circle and the others would follow him, keep following in a circle. So you were right when you say it isn't always good to follow a leader. When would you follow a leader and when wouldn't you? All right, let's hear from you guys. Okay, that is very good. Did you hear her? It's bad to follow a leader when a leader is bad or wants to do something bad or wants to lead you into doing something bad. Following the leader is good when it's a good leader and he wants you to do good things. So might who be a good leader to follow? God, okay. Who else? Okay. Teachers? Are there good teachers and are there bad teachers? No, we don't want to go there, do we? Okay. What other would be a good leader? Your parents, okay. All right, so Jesus says that you need to follow, but when he wanted to follow, he wanted you to follow him. Because as you say, he did good things and led other people to do good things. You did really well today. Understand that we like to follow leaders, but we need to follow good leaders and refrain from following bad leaders because they might take us just in a circle. Give them a hand, please. The Holy Gospel is written in the first chapter of St. John, beginning at the 43rd verse. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip saw Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses wrote in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus the son of Joseph from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said of him, "He is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly, I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." Here ends the gospel for the day. Please be seated. There are two phrases that I would like you to look at this morning from this morning's gospel. One you want to try and avoid. The other one probably is something that you should cultivate and think about following. The first one reminds me very much of a personal incident that happened to me in high school. I've thought about it a few times before, but it really came through this week when I read the gospel text and saw the words that I was going to read from the gospel text this morning. I lived in a small town of 1,100 in southern Minnesota, and one of the things that was common there is that there were a number of rural schools that fed the high school. The number of rural schools would teach the children up to the age, or up to the grade 8, and then they would come into our school for high school. One of the girls that transferred to our high school when I was in 9th grade kind of just blended in. She wasn't somebody that stood out at all. She hadn't been with the class from 1st grade or 2nd grade like we all had. So she really wasn't a part of the clique. The cliques had already formed. She was a member of 4 or 5 others that came from other rural schools and were just kind of ignored by the rest of the students. She was a decent person, dressed very conservatively, spoke well of all people, but kind of just blended into the woodwork. When we were seniors in high school, we were in a play called together called Cheaper by the Dozen. And Jerry was my twin sister in the play. And we were together for those 6 weeks of practice practically all the time, because we always were together on stage at the same time and off stage at the same time. And she became a subject of interest to me. And after the play was over, I had decided this is somebody that I should ask for a date. So I went to the mother because she had the car keys, and I said, "I think I'm going to ask Jerry out for a date." And she said, "Who?" She controlled a lot of things in my life. And I said, I gave her the name. And she said, "I don't think you ought to go out with her, and I don't think I'll give you the keys." And I said, "Why not?" She said, "She's from Wayland." She's from Wayland, and she said, "My mother, can anything good come out of Wayland?" I never saw my mother as somebody who was prejudiced, but she just said, "Can anything good come out of that town?" Wayland is kind of like McDade or Page is to Elgin. Didn't have a real grocery store of its own. Some of the streets weren't paved, no curb and gutter, and generally what we considered lower class. Yes, we, Christians, considered them lower class. Besides that, my mother said she's a Baptist. Well, it's a good thing she wasn't in Texas, because that's the first time I had ever heard anybody who was a Baptist. We didn't have one in Lanesboro. And what's wrong with that? And she said, well, they don't baptize children. Well, I didn't know much about it. I hadn't been to the seminary yet, but it sounded all right to me. So and besides the fact that my father had died and I was doing all the farm work, and it was now spring, and I was going to be out in the field most of the time during the rest of the school year and into the summer, I just forgot about it, wrote her off. Can anything good come out of Wayland? In our gospel text, we talk about Jesus going out and getting his inner circle together. And according to John, Philip is the first one that he confronts. It's not true in the Synoptic Gospels. Peter, James, and John are the first three that he calls on. But Philip gets excited about this person that he's met. And he goes to a friend of his by the name of Nathanael, really the only time we hear of Nathanael in the Gospels. And he said, I want you to come and see the person that answers the questions we have about Moses. He's descended from Moses, and he's the Savior, the King of Israel. And you read it with me this morning. Nathanael says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? He was from Bethsaida, I guess, 4.5 miles from Nazareth. Nazareth was kind of the Wayland or the Page of Israel. Off the beaten path, wasn't much of a population, and generally anybody coming from there was not considered reputable or certainly not that important. And I began to wonder as I was reading this, how many times have we avoided relationships because of one little prejudice in our life? One little word, one label that is put on somebody that automatically disqualifies them from a relationship with us. But from our gospel text, even more important than that, how many times have we avoided someone that can enrich us spiritually, or that we can enrich spiritually because we have some kind of minor label that we put on them and stand off and put ourselves aside? Jesus taught us that everybody has a story, and it's a learning experience. And the greatest thing that you can do is become involved in people's lives in a positive way. And we continue to put on labels and avoid relationships. One of the real precious jewels of being able to be a pastor in this congregation is to visit the many, many people that come here to take pictures or just see the church. And thank goodness for that thing on an internet that says it's the most photographed church in Texas, because people come here just for that. But it opened the door, and we began to talk, and sometimes a relationship develops. And I come over. I like people. And there's always the opportunity to start building a relationship or to become important in somebody's life or have them say something to me that's important about what church is. Because when they come here, they have some interest in church or religion, not just a building. And there are relationships that have developed whereby I don't live near those people, but I communicate with them a few times a year for years. The possibility is always open when you meet somebody. It'll be something significant for you or for them in the relationship. And don't automatically say, can anything good come from this place or this religion or this race or whatever excuse you want to use to cut yourself off from another person of God's creation. So avoid the tendency to say, can anything good come out of? The second phrase that's interesting, and I think you ought to observe this one, and it comes from Philip. He says, come and see. Nathanael didn't want to meet Jesus. He wanted to avoid that relationship because the person came from a place he didn't really respect. And Philip doesn't argue. He just simply says, well, come and see for yourself. It's so interesting that when we talk about evangelism with people, if you think you're going to witness to Jesus, somehow you have to know a certain body of knowledge. You've got to be able to argue your case. You've got to make some kind of powerful statement. But I think the most positive thing you can do in evangelism is just come and see. Make your own decision. Come and see for yourself. I remember a couple of cases in which I had the opportunity to meet somebody that was, had the possibility of leading me spiritually. And I decided that I was going to close down that door. One I remember particularly was in my senior year of seminary. There was a fellow coming by the name of Sam Shoemaker, and he was going to speak at chapel. And I decided it was a good day to stay home because he was Anglican. What good was he? Still, deep prejudice. A fellow across the hall said, look, you got to come. You got to come and hear this person. He has established Young Life, a powerful organization, Christian organization for youth. He kind of dragged me there. But he made such an effect with a 20-minute sermon. I remembered it all my life and have used many of his quotes from books in preaching. One of the most powerful preachers when I was a young kid was the minister at Central Lutheran in Minneapolis, called the papacy of the Lutheran Church. And the speaker there was a mesmerizing speaker, a great orator, Shorty Yortland. Thought he was the greatest thing on earth. Listened to him every Sunday on the radio after he came home from our own services. And he took a call to Chicago. And then the new speaker came to our youth convention, and he was the new minister at Central Lutheran. A. Reuben Granitska, I remember. And I decided I didn't want to go. How could anybody replace Shorty Yortland? I skipped that. The minister that took us down, our minister scolded me for not going. Well, he can't be as good as the other one, the one that left. You just write him off like that? That's pretty sad, Hans. Well, I never heard any more about him until our superintendent, who was his classmate at St. Olaf, invited him to speak at my graduation service. Yes, in those days we could have a minister give the commencement address. He the most powerful sermon I ever heard. I've used it many times. I remember almost word for word. dynamic. Didn't have the oratory skills. He was kind of an aw shucks preacher. Home style. Different style, but oh so powerful. People just said, come and see. Come and see for yourself. You know, people are kind of a try it before you buy it mode from our commercial endeavors. The best case for a product isn't to tout its propriety, its benefits. It's to say, just try it. And that's where the emphasis is on most commercials. We'll give you a sample to try free. Just try it. Come and see. John, writing in the first letter, he said, we declare to you what was from the beginning is what we have heard, what we have seen with our own eyes, and what we have looked at and touched with our hands. Nathanael was drawn to Jesus because he could see, because he could listen to him, because he could touch and feel. When you're bringing someone or want someone to come along to church, you don't have to make a big case for it. Just say, come and see if something is there worth becoming a part of. Another thing that commercial companies do is that they give you a chance to return the product if you don't like it. Takes the risk out of it, isn't it? You don't have to convince somebody to join the church before they visit. Try it. If it works for you, if it's meaningful for you, if you can become a part of it and be significant in it, then become a part of it. Another thing I noticed that was important, look at the way Jesus approaches someone in a relationship and how Nathanael does it. Nathanael comes with all kinds of doubts, with all kinds of built-in prejudices, looking for the negative. What is there about this person that I can find that isn't really worth following? And Jesus comes and looks at Nathanael and looks for the positive. And when Nathanael comes to him, he said, behold, this is an Israelite in whom there is no guile. You say, are you kidding? He says, Nathanael is somebody that has no guile? He just said, you weren't worth looking at, Jesus, because you came from Nazareth. What kind of a person is this that has no guile? But Jesus was not particularly interested in anything other than coming across and saying, I love you. One of the greatest advisements that I've had in terms of selling, whether it be the church or any product, is people prefer to know how much you care before they want to know how much you know. Ministry isn't about knowing stuff. It's about caring. Caring enough that you can say to people, come and see what I have. And maybe it's good for you. And maybe I can be important in your life. And maybe you can be important in mine. 2 statements today. One you ought to avoid. Can anything good come out of you fill in the blank? Avoid it. The one to use effectively, powerfully, is come and see. Amen. Sermon hymn, Here I Am, Lord, 574. Please stand if you are able.